All right, you guys. I just went back to what I knew. So we are back. We have camera. We have, I'm hoping, sound.
We have ignition.
We have ignition. And so we got through two of the questions. We're going to go ahead and jump to the third. And if you missed it the first go around, we will have that all combined on Spotify so you can listen to this at least in a whole sense and where audio video isn't necessary. So what do you got for us now?
He said, what one person most affected the choices you made in your career? In talking about comedy, and I've been actually doing open mics and been kind of hacking around for about 30 years. And there was a guy.
Wow, that's a long time.
There was a guy that some of the other old timers would know by the name of Ty Wilson. Ty Wilson, 30 years. He's passed away now, but he was a comic that was one of the writers for the original Laugh-In show back in the 60s.
Okay.
He was a former lover and roommate of Goldie Hawn way back in the day when she was first on.
Dang, he must have been good looking.
And he was a comic. He was a comics comic, and he liked to take a lot of comics under his wing and try to teach them a lot of things. And he actually kind of enlightened me about the business quite a bit. And the one thing that he impressed upon a lot of us was to always write. That you always had to write. Now that was back 30 years ago. I mean, there were little tape recorders, handheld, but it was mostly pen and paper. And I carry pen and paper with me every day.
I still do it too.
And because one of the things that he always said that was so true is he goes, you'll think of about 30 or 40 funny things a day that you'd like to tell on stage. If you don't write them down, you'll never remember them. And that was always the truth. So
that is true, because I know there are times I've had to pull over just so I could write something out, because obviously I have to write it in long form because I tried the whole short note thing and I'm like, why would I write that?
Yep. And I used to carry around little 3x5 note cards and everything. And before we had stuff like cell phones where you could, actually have files that you would use. And then I'd make my list out on the 3x5 card and just go over the list. He also told me, he said, don't just memorize your list and then let the joke flow as it may and everything. So you don't get stuck into a rut where you're telling the same joke over and over again, the same syllable, the same this, that, and the other. And but he also used to talk about the power of the pause when you're telling a joke, because the
pregnant pause.
Yeah.
Right?
As he used to say, when people are out in the crowd and they're drinking, you've got to give them a chance to catch up with you a little bit. So you have to kind of slow down. And when I first started, I was like, 5 cups of coffee in and get up there and just be a maniac and everything. And you just wear people out, you just back and forth, being like real manic.
Like you're just going in for the kill.
Yeah. So he was big on that also. And one of the things that he never tried to teach people this, because you can either do it or you can't. And I don't see very many people doing it nowadays, but facial expressions. This guy
exaggerated.
This guy was really big on doing doing the old red skeleton type of a very famous Hoosier, as a matter of fact, facial expressions to sell your jokes. He said your face can sell your joke as well as the words. So I always remembered those things. I mean, I don't always do it because it sometimes it doesn't come natural to me, but that was really, really good advice.
Yeah.
I remember being on different shows and everything. I always used to like hanging out with the comics that were touring and whatnot. And I used to just listen to whatever they would say. And it's very rare that you don't have a comic that will share with you
some piece of wisdom, something that can stick with you. So,
and that's what kind of drew me into comedy. After I first tried it, and I don't know, I was trying to think on the way over here what motivated me to get up on stage for the first time, and I still don't really know.
You don't remember?
It wasn't. I don't think anybody said, "Work, and maybe you should do one of these open mics." I just did it one day. I think back in the day with the original Bob and Tom show. Bob and Tom show is still excellent, but Bob and Tom brought,
Also out of Indy.
yeah, exactly. And they brought all these comics that were touring and made Indianapolis kind of a hub for all touring comedians. You had to go through Indy. I mean, I don't want to say if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, but the power that they had over the comedy business by having comics on in the morning, I think was kind of what made me want to give it a try. So first time I ever did it, where Joker's is now, it used to be a place called the Comedy Connection way.
Okay, so it was also, I heard Crackers at one point too.
It was a Crackers at one time, but originally it was a place called the Comedy Connection, and there was a local disc jockey from Q95 that was going to be there on one particular night. That was an open mic night. His name is Jimmy Mad Dog Matus. If anybody remembers him, he was a big deal back in the 80s and 90s with WFPQ. It was a lot of really funny people went through there. Mark, if you know Mark Munch from Nervous Vern and Munchie, he was a character that anybody that listened to that show back then remembers. He was the Reverend Ernest Honestly, and he was Haji, and it was just hilarious radio. And I think that kind of got me thinking that maybe I should give it a try. So I give the old Bob and Tom show a lot of credit. Also, for some reason, I remember there was a time where I would stay up late just to watch Johnny Carson's monologue. And then Letterman came after Carson, but he was really influential as well. Just the way that he, the way that he would tell jokes and have comics on. So those are
we've had a lot of influence in comedy roll through Indianapolis.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's been some that say Indianapolis doesn't have a hot comedy scene, but if you think about just what you're talking about, we clearly have a thriving comedy scene. We are a hub.
Yeah.
I mean, it's why we're called the Crossroads of America. You just have to go through us to get anywhere, at least if you want, Chicago. I mean, obviously it depends where you're going, but we're kind of central for a lot of cities.
Well, back, one of the things that I'm a big fan of is I'm a big fan of history. And actually I'm working on a book that is going to be released on February 29th of 2020.
Oh, okay.
The reason it's the 29th is because that's leap year and that's my birthday.
You were born on the 29th?
I was born
So how old are you technically in leap years? I'm so curious now.
Well, I'll be 64, so I'll be 16?
So we really have a young in here.
Yeah, so I'll be 16, so I'll be able to drive legally then. But that's when the book is going to be released, and without getting into the book too much and everything, it goes over what Indianapolis was like after the Civil War, between the Civil War time and like 1900. And it was a vibrant comedy scene back then. Indianapolis was a huge vaudeville destination because there were so many trains that went through Indianapolis, people going east, west, north, and south. Indianapolis was just really, really hopping back then. It was a drunken time as well. Prohibition started because of a couple of ministers on the Near East Side of Indianapolis started something called the Anti-Saloon League, and Prohibition caught on here first and then went nationwide for some reason.
So you mean Prohibition started in Indiana?
Yep. Started.
Had no idea.
Yep. That's where it gained traction. I mean,
Lord, that makes total sense now. Why we just recently were able to buy alcohol
on Sundays, because that was the last of the holdouts. But and the reason it was like that was because there were so many trains that were coming. There was a train that stopped in Indianapolis. I think it was in my research in like the 1870s. Every 15 minutes, there was a train that was either that was deboarding every 15 minutes. And if you had a layover, then you used to have a couple hours to kill. You'd go to where Union Station is now, or you'd go on Meridian or Pennsylvania Street, and there were saloons, taverns. Prostitution was big back then.
So basically we were a hub for all things wrong, but yet we have got to be living in one of the most conservative freaking states around. I mean, well, no, not necessarily, because I mean, like in Kentucky, you still have counties you can't even buy alcohol in. So I mean, I guess that's even more conservative.
Yeah, I would think that. I would think that. I mean, you must really have some some people that are just really anti-alcohol to have dry counties. I mean, come on. I mean,
That's true.
but
You know, I hate to do this to you, but we're going to take a 3-minute break because this is where we're going to interject, like, I don't know, ads.
okay.
So we call this a 3-minute intermission to go to the bathroom.
3 minutes.
Need to own this blonde moment right now. We are back on take 3. And the reason we are on take 3 is because, well, obviously, if people tuned in, we didn't have video the first go around. Second go around, I had the privacy settings to just me because I was trying to test out the equipment or the new software that it's more advanced than me. So I promise this will all be fixed in post. So if you missed any part of it, the audio version will be all totally complete and for your listening pleasure. But we were just talking about, because I'm fascinated by the prohibition, and I'm totally going to change this up on you because for some reason this keeps coming up, and I really wanted to address this because I've been researching. I'm about ready to get into the whole PC comedy and the politically correct, and you know, I literally posted that question, and comedians from all over the country put in their opinions on what it is. I've also read a lot about it, and I mean, the PC culture, not a new thing. People have been complaining about it's going to kill comedy and all of that. I mean, has that not always, I mean, you've been doing this a long time. Is this like a complaint that seems to just be a constant?
No, it's something about the time we live in. It's something that's different. And I saw something on television the other night. Adam Carolla was on, and he was talking about how they're not calling it censorship, but they're calling it. He's finding that he's not allowed to say what he used to be able to say. Today, as a matter of fact, is the first day of a 5-day suspension for local broadcaster Dan Dockage on 1070 The Fan, sports talk radio program, where he has been suspended because he's too controversial, which is what his stick was. His stick was that he was unfiltered and anything goes, and he would talk about any subject. And finally, ESPN put the foot down and everything, and made and 1070 The Fan is a radio affiliate of ESPN, and they said,
can't do that.
Suspend it.
I know we got a couple of listeners, but because I brought this up, I have a couple of sticky notes I want to grab off camera. So Bill is going to tell us his best stage that he has been on while I grab these. And then we're going to jump back into PC because I'm unprepared and it's a Monday and it's another blind moment. So tell him.
Oh, the best stage. One of the more interesting ones in the last couple of years has been the Irving Theater, which is over in Irvington. Did a show for Mad Hatter Productions, and it was just an older type theater, different than a club. The clubs are so are meant to be so intimate, like they were back in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
It seemed like every club was not a comedy club unless you had a brick wall behind behind the microphone. But the Irving Theater was very interesting because I just don't really.
I think I've been there for a production. And it's kind of very elegant.
Yeah, it's old and it's elegant. It's very very spacey. There's a place up in Royal Oak, Michigan called Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle, and it is a very very nice stage to be on. It's not a theater type of setup. It was actually built to be kind of a club, whereas I think just about every other comedy club used to be a warehouse or some other kind of business.
Right. Right. It's like it was like a side thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I forget.
And I've noticed that. Yeah.
And I forget what were the current Jokers, what it used to be, but I think it was definitely a warehouse because it was down in the warehouse district in downtown Indianapolis. So it's kind of interesting when you go into a place that's built for comedy as opposed to not.
Right.
The old Funny Bone, which was morphed into Morty's, that used to be on 96th Street, was constructed to be a club. So it just would look like a comedy club, and it's hard to describe the difference between a comedy club that was built to be one.
Right, because of the seating. Well, the seating's a little better. The acoustics. I mean, it's designed to accommodate that.
Yeah.
So, since you've been around, and I'm redrawing this back to the PC because that was kind of important. Some of the things that I have words particularly that I've come across is some people define PC as just not being toxic, don't offend, don't alienate, be culturally sensitive, not offensive, not inclusive, hurting others' feelings for cheap amusement is how they avoid offending any topics that are considered politically awake at the time.
Right.
Use your common sense, because if you're making jokes, you're oppressing whoever you're making jokes on. Sorry, I'm just putting all this out here. There's I don't remember exactly who this quote was, but basically, some people that don't want to do PC, there's a particular comedian said that people that don't like PC are just wanting a free pass to be bigots and to offend and racist, and obviously it goes. I mean, some people say, yeah, people are too sensitive, and people are getting to their feelings too easily hurt, and long story short, like you said, the one gentleman is on suspension. So if you're not adhering to politically correct, there's been like this thing of wanting to blackball people and shut down, shows, and you understand what I'm saying.
There's one of our local open mic venues, I think, has kind of run into a little bit of a we'll call it censorship, but they wanted to clean it up a lot. I think that's why Gutty's Comedy Club down in Greenwood.
I just want to get those words out there, but yeah, they're all clean.
They're all clean.
They're like church clean.
Well, I think when I first started in comedy, it was the Lenny Bruce era had kind of come and passed, but comedy back then was, you wanted to outrage people. You wanted to say things that they would dare not say
right
themselves. And that has changed now. That now people don't want to even sit and listen to something that they think is controversial or offensive.
Now, I know that comedy has been pretty instrumental. It's an excellent way to say things that might be crossing people's mind that nobody else wants to say. But it's also, in my opinion, a very effective way to kind of break that wall down to talk about those sensitive topics, because you approach it in a lighter tone versus in your throat, fight. I mean, that's kind of one view.
People have kind of changed, or from the way that they used to consume comedy, and they wanted to take serious topics and then find a laugh out of it. But now, if it's a serious topic, you just don't even go there. Back when I started, I remember there was a comic that came up to me and said, the only word you can't say is the C word. And that, I think, is still the same, but that was the only.
For all those people not paying attention out there, that word would be cunt. Oh, by the way, I am uncensored, unedited, and uncut.
And so
I made him turn red. Stop.
You had to say stuff like, well, she's somebody that you could describe as rhyming with bunt.
Okay, so yeah.
Or so you had to do those types of things, but now people don't want to be outraged as much until you get on the political, in the current political environment, where it seems like whenever I watch a Trump rally, he can't be more outrageous or sometimes offensive enough for people. So I'm wondering if now that we're starting, the pendulum is starting to swing a little bit, so that so now you can say things that are outrageous.
Well, being a female had this particular believe it or not, this particular thing, I think the PC culture, it's a little bit harsher currently on women. And honestly, I have run into issues because a lot of people take offense to the things that I say because it comes off as vulgar or, offensive. I mean, people are offended by vulgar. You understand? And is it really though? Because, I mean, if a man were to say the exact same thing, it isn't nearly as offensive as it is coming out of my mouth, for one.
Right.
And so what your thoughts on that? Do you think that makes a difference?
I think, well, the female comics that I kind of grew up watching, Joan Rivers, Phyllis Diller, Joan Rivers, if you ever get a chance to listen to one of her old, she was really, really out there. But I think that for a female to sell their vulgar material and make it funny, you have to do like Joan Rivers and Phyllis Diller did, and use a lot of facial type of expressions. Like Phyllis Diller used to talk about her husband Fang, and she had that she had that that one laugh thing when people wouldn't laugh, she would laugh for you, and she really knew how to drag the crowd around by the nose and everything, and get them to laugh at different things. I think that society reflects that even though I've grown up and seen women get more rights, more social justice, more positions where they're totally competitive with men, but it doesn't translate into comedy. I don't think as much. I don't think it's gone there as much.
Which is hilarious to me because this is the one place where my comedy is built on. Every bit of it is on some element of the truth. And some of the stuff I say, these are like legitimate things that people have said to me. And I find it hilarious that, it's acceptable for people to talk to me that way, but it's not acceptable for me to take it to the stage, call it out, and then make a joke out of it. Because you know what? Sometimes, when you get bombarded with all that negativity, the best way to deal with it is to laugh about it. And
Indeed, true.
it's a catch-22. I think, at least I'm currently feeling that way as a female.
I think I agree with that, but there's oftentimes people will tell me that they won't really necessarily laugh at what you say, but when they're driving home, they go, "Hey, wasn't there that line where she said that was really something?" But nobody laughs, so the immediate feedback thing sometimes isn't there.
So do you think it's maybe is that a guy or a female? Do you think guys are just they think it's funny but they're afraid to laugh?
I think so. I think in some instances you don't want to like. For example, and I've had this conversation with both male and female black comics. When they drop the N-bomb and everything, I don't laugh, even though it might be funny. I feel, should I? I don't know. I wouldn't raise that way, blah blah blah, and but it could just be funny as could be. Richard Pryor was able to pull that off, but he was one of the few that could get white people to laugh at the N-word, I think. Or he was one of the very, very.
So why do you think you won't laugh even if it's funny? Are you afraid that your laughing is what, like it?
I think for things like for race or things that are very, very serious topics, that when you go there as a comic, you sometimes either strike a nerve or somebody will say, "Well, I better not laugh at that," and they get home and they think, man, that was really funny what you said. So, I think, and I also, as far as female stuff goes, I looked up in the Bible. I wanted to find out in the Bible, where was the first reference in the Bible where it referenced laughter. And it was back in the book of Genesis when Abraham went to his wife, and at the age of 681 years old, because that's in the Bible, they depict her as being 681 years old, that God
had cat years or dog years, one of the two.
God had come to him in a vision and said that she was to have another child. I think it was either Cain or Abel or something like that. And she laughed. And she just, according to the Bible, she just laughed. Yeah, right. You know, yeah, right. Are you serious? You know, that kind of thing. So, I always thought that was kind of funny.
That is Bible. See, even God had a sense of humor, because who the heck wants to have a kid at 600 years old? But I'm not actually taking away. And, you know, I definitely, we've got serious topics that you certainly, I think that, you know, when things change, times change. So does the comedy with it. For instance, you know, back in the day, it was funny for a guy to get on stage dressed as a woman acting all crazy. It was humorous. Now it's not really, because it's an acceptable. We have a whole group of people, one, that do it way better than the comedians could ever do it. Well, they do it better. They sometimes look better on a woman than I do. I'm female hating on you guys out there, just saying, because I mean, you make it look so freaking easy. But, you know, they're like, that's changed. So, you know, the comedy, obviously, that used to, but did it not open the door?
Oh, yeah, I definitely think so. I think television was a big part of that, because when television started to be driven by advertisers, and advertisers didn't want to offend people. So if you wanted to hear Bill Cosby in the rough, uncut version of him, you had to go to a club. Now he ended up having an act that was very extremely squeaky clean, not even an innuendo or anything like that. But if you wanted to go hear the dirty version of a particular comic, you had to see it live. So seeing it live was always a better value for your comedy fix.
Right. Well, and you know, there's a lot of those movements where people have said something along the lines in their career, and it's come back recently to bite them. Certain things, I think, are just ignorant to bring up, because I mean, when you are younger, your views are very boxed, because your life has not been exposed to anything other than your immediate surroundings. And obviously, I would assume, as you've gotten older, there are things in your life where your views have changed just out of exposure and understanding.
Oh, absolutely. I was watching television today, and I watch a lot of political shows, and I'm not so sure that if Mayor Pete Buttigieg from out of South Bend is going to be running for president, I'm not so sure that I would have supported him 15 years ago.
Right.
But now it's like, oh, okay.
It's not who he is currently.
Yeah, it's not anything about his personal thing. He sounds like a very, very sharp guy and everything. And right now, he's going to be the one that the Democrat. If I was going to vote I'm going to vote Democratic. But he's probably he's got my vote right now, because he's got he sounds like he's got a plan. He sounds reasonable. He's in the military. He carried a weapon. He fought for the country. I mean, you know, so he's got a lot of stuff that I think is really kind of important. But 15, 20 years ago, I'm not so sure that I wouldn't have thought that his personal choice in life and everything would translate to him being a good leader. But I think a lot of people kind of feel that way, and it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting to find out.
That's kind of where I'm looking at some of this stuff. It's like, how far do you really need to be digging back and trying to destroy something that people have built and evolved? I mean, I've watched on the news many people's careers just disintegrate,
get destroyed. Yeah.
And, you know, over, you know, things that you do when you're immature. And I mean, we all live in a time where I'm so glad I didn't grow up in this time, because every mistake that you've ever made as, you know, a younger you, magnified like this, that would be terrible.
Documented, cataloged, and brought up on,
I mean, you would
never.
Facebook. And I don't know. I find it humorous that there are so many people out there that have that much time to go and sift through Facebook pages and posts from years and years ago, and then utilize that to bring a person down. Like, I'm sorry, have you ever met anybody who didn't put their foot in their mouth?
No.
I mean, so why are we destroying careers over this? You know,
I I don't know. It's a different. That's why things are different nowadays than they used to be, because now it's the zinger. How can I, how can I get you? How can I have my YouTube moment?
Right.
You
And
know,
once it's out there, it's like a freaking snowball. And once it's taken off, you can't undo it.
yeah.
I mean, there have been people, even just the mere mention or something taken out of context, you can literally ruin somebody's entire life.
I can relate to one instance in comedy that has stuck with me way back in the day when the current Jokers was Crackers. There was a comic that has passed away now. His name was John Fox.
Okay.
And John Fox was a favorite of Bob and Tom.
Mm-hmm.
He was just, I mean, in his act, he was using the F-bomb
Mm-hmm.
within the first 3 or 4 words of his first set, because that's just what everybody came to expect. And I got the chance to be the MC on a week where he was in Indianapolis, and the feature act was a guy named Mark Eddy who played guitar, and I don't know whatever happened to him, but he was extremely talented. But the one thing about John Fox was, well, he was always, he'd wake up and he'd wake up to a cigarette and Jack Daniels, and which is unfortunately part of the reason why he's not with us anymore. But he was a huge partier, and he would just get totally obliterated. Sam Kinison obliterated before the show would start. And I remember as the MC, I made the mistake of firing up a joint in the green room of the old Crackers, and the owner walked in. And since then, since then, Crackers is pretty much, and this was 20 years. I mean, this is a good 20 years ago. Nobody they in the comedy business, you just don't forget. And I don't know why. I don't know why that is and everything. I still don't have any regrets of doing it, because I mean that was a great comedy week being with him, and full houses every night, and it was raucous and it was just great. But just that one little thing of trying to be the good MC and everything, and I popped that doobie out and everything, and we just blazed it up right there in the green room, and I haven't worked at Crackers since. They still have somewhat the same management, the same owner.
And that seems totally senseless at this point, because I mean, we've got it legalized in states for recreational use, including what Illinois is going to join. Michigan's there. I don't know. I know you can, at least medically, in Ohio. We live in the prohibition start state. So,
well, it's kind of funny because last week I went to a seminar on how to build the marijuana business, and there's a Sirius radio show called the Cannabis Network, and they had 4 guys that came by and had a seminar. It was a pre-seminar. You had to pay like $900 to go to the next one as to how to set up the entire business. So they gave you just a little bit of an idea as to what that they were going to offer as far as marketing, and answer some questions about the business and whatnot. And in my life, and the reason I went to the seminar was because I was interested.
Right.
But I'm also a respiratory therapist, so I'm not sure if I opened up a cannabis business on the side and everything, the hospital would.
Well, you don't have to smoke it. They have all ways to ingest it without it messing with your lungs.
Yeah, that's true. But still, I think that professionally and everything would not be to my advantage. But they talked about how to set up that particular business, and I think that edibles is going to be it seemed to be that edibles was going to be the next big thing, because as a respiratory therapist,
smoking is
terrible. Anytime you smoke and marijuana burns so much hotter than tobacco does that you get an inflammatory response to your airways. But if you eat it, you don't.
Good point.
In cannabinoids, they've done research. There's the best research was done, I think, in 2003, where they talk about the cannabinoid part of cannabis is an anti-inflammatory, and that's why people take
Not
it.
if you're smoking it, people. That's why you hack your
Allegedly.
lungs out.
Yeah, exactly. But it's getting the cannabinoid down into where it can do you some good. You take a path of a lot of resistance and everything, in the form of like bronchospasming and stuff like that. But there's going to be there's going to be a huge market for it. And in my lifetime, I'll tell you the three things, and cannabis is probably the third, but two other things that I could have gotten on board with at the very beginning that I didn't. Number one, I remember when the internet first started. If those of you that have always had the internet,
I didn't grow
there
up
was
with the internet.
I knew a couple of guys that got into the .com thing and was trying to convince me. I'd say, well, but don't you just, you look some stuff up and then you're doing your research papers and everything, and how is that going to translate into a multi-billion-dollar business? Well, I was definitely wrong on that one. I didn't see the potential of what the internet could do from a marketing and a monetary type perspective. The other one was I had a chance to get in on chicken wings when
I remember you telling me that
there was a chicken wing franchise.
And you're like,
this one guy came by and it was Buffalo Wild Wings, and I had a cousin that sold franchises, and he came to all of us in the family and everything. He said, hey, you're going to want to get in on this and everything. And he brought some samples along at a family reunion of boneless chicken wings,
which is the only way I eat them.
And me too. And it's the best value. But I looked at it and I said, Jim, you got to be out of your mind. Number one, they don't look like no damn chicken wing. And who's going to go to a place where they just have chicken wings? And now
that's one of my favorite places to eat.
Well, I mean, and now you can't go to places that don't have them. I mean, maybe even Chinese restaurants have appetizers that are chicken wings. So I missed out on chicken wings, the internet and chicken wings. I thought, man, I'm going to check out this marijuana industry and what it can potentially be. And from what they were saying at the seminar, and you just like you were saying, they said, well, it's legal everyplace else and it's not legal here. Well, now's the time to get
it all set up.
Now's the time to get it set up.
You are on it. You are ahead of the game. That's a great idea.
Yeah, so you're ahead of everything. So they talked about a lot of the different aspects of opportunities that are going to go along with the marijuana business in the next 10, 15 years. Everything, delivery, distribution, marketing, all that sort of stuff. And
that's a good point. Yeah.
And they actually at their seminar and everything, they gave away a grow house. You fill out a little piece of paper and put it in the box and everything, and they pull out somebody's name and they give you a greenhouse. And they give you a greenhouse. And
I would have taken the greenhouse because I would have used it, not for that, but I would have used it.
Yeah, but we had some very, very good discussions. I said, okay, I'm going to open up a business that could be marijuana and everything. How do I insure it? And they said, well, you wouldn't be able to insure it here in Indiana because it's not legal. I said, okay, well, let's say it is legal. How do you insure it? Well, if you are going to have a legitimate business, the insurance is just outrageously expensive. Yeah, it's just
so. There's another market.
Yeah, I mean,
up. Yeah.
If you have your grow facility is within your house, which a lot of people, home-based businesses are as old as time itself practically. But if you're going to have your home-based business and you're going to grow in your own house, you can't let anybody know. I mean,
right?
I live on the east side, and and if you walk by a car in a parking lot and it smells like somebody just got finished smoking in there, somebody's going to break into your car.
That's crazy.
So
that's terrible.
So you can't let anybody know. And the other thing that they talked about was that you can designate land in the rural areas and everything to be growth area, growth spots or growth plots and stuff like that. But then again, somebody's going to know. Somebody's going to know that you have a license, and it's going to have to be licensed too. So you're going to have to go to the state of Indiana, so the state's going to get their a part of it, and plus they're going to get money on the back end. The state is going to be just like the dealers in this. They're going to get the money from the license and the money from the taxes when you sell it.
That's the downside in Indiana is the money is not a motivator. We're actually one of the very few states that our budget isn't upside down. So we can't even utilize it as a way to save the economy.
Yeah, exactly. And you
got to have the incentive.
What you've I mean, now I think for every pack of cigarettes, I think half of that goes, is taxed, and it goes towards healthcare in the state. And so, you know what, if they're going to tax marijuana, you're going to have to apply that tax money to something that's going to help the state. And it would just, to me, would just be funny as hell as if, okay, for every joint you buy, you're helping a kid get through school, you know.
I think that's a great idea.
I think it is too.
You know,
it's just
free state college or something, because let me tell you, college is expensive.
Exactly. So, I think that's the next big thing, and the people that get in on it, and see the vision, and as soon as they lost half the room when they said that the next seminar was going to cost $900.
Oh, right.
I don't have $900, but $900 to have your own personal consulting firm that has a stake in you being successful. That's one thing that they were telling us. They said, hey, we want you guys to be successful marijuana distributors, growers, and business people. And the one joke they said was, you know, you don't have to be really smart. You don't have to have, you know, a business degree and everything. This is higher education. And then everybody started laughing and everything when he said that. But yeah, it's
very punny.
It's the next. It's going to be the next big thing in this state. And the fact that it's not here now is really gives the entrepreneurs and the people that are going to be the movers and shakers. But also, they also said to beware of companies like Anheuser-Busch and Monsanto and Johnson & Johnson, because a lot of major corporations, I mean, Eli Lilly's first patent, the very first patent of Eli Lilly's after the Civil War was a compounded mixture to help relieve pain and anxiety, and it was 40% alcohol and cannabis. Eli Lilly, the reason why Eli Lilly has a plant out in Greenfield was because Eli Lilly bought 169 acres and grew his own weed back in the 1880s.
Huh. I have no idea.
So if you Google that, now the Lilly family's not extremely excited about
you know,
that.
Along with the cannabis, I know that they've done a lot of research into the positive effects of like DMT. I mean, there's really not much against there's a lot more benefits. It's similar to pot, and it's so that may be the next wave too.
Yeah.
So we might be brewing some homegrown chemists.
If you you know, it could very well be in 30 years from now and everything. You know, you might see a commercial on TV that says, does your kid just never settle down? Can he just not
just make him trip balls?
Can he just not seem to concentrate and stay in one spot? Here, give him Panama Red. Panama Red will help calm him down. And so they're going to have marketing things like that.
And we're a consumer culture, so marketing is effective. Sadly, I mean, you can just about convince somebody that they need it, especially when it comes to drugs.
Exactly. And then on the other end of the pendulum, I've had a couple of weeks off, so I've gone to see some seminars and everything, the things that interest me, in stem cells. Now, stem cell therapy is going to replace the opioid market for pain killing, because they had all this data and they said that it was going to be that instead of, and you see this now with NFL football players and everything, you know, having, you know, smoking marijuana and everything for pain, but there is part of the cannabinoid compound that it acts like that anti-inflammatory, like we were talking about.
I had no idea you were so knowledgeable.
What was
on this?
That's sticking with the famous people. What aspect of your reputation is least deserved? I don't know. Maybe because I look like I'm a narc or something. I had somebody tell me. I had somebody tell me once that, you know what, you reminded me of my probation officer back when I was. I said, no, I was the guy in the lobby. No, I was the guy in the lobby that was waiting to go after you to see the probation officer. But we're going to treat pain eventually by getting rid of opioids and consumption of cannabinoids for anti-inflammatory. And it also helps your your ability to sleep. And nobody's ever overdosed on cannabis.
That's true.
You might have eaten yourself to sleep,
I'm with you on the sleep thing, because that's one of the reasons I'm not like a big fan of it, because it just knocks me out. I mean, my brain literally ceases to function. I mean, I can't normally, obviously I'm ADHD. And so my brain is constantly, and it obviously has a side effect of interfering with one's sleep because of the fact that you can't shut your brain off, which is maddening. And yeah, pot, that does it. It just makes me go stupefied.
Can you perform comedy high?
Could I perform? No, I couldn't.
There are some.
I mean, it literally it like shuts down my ability to think.
I back in the day and everything, I use them. Right now, I'm just, I work for a hospital and I'm just afraid of losing my job.
Well, yeah, you don't want to do that.
Because we drug test and I'm 63, getting close to retirement.
But that doesn't mean you still can't be an advocate.
Yeah, and I definitely do advocate. But for all budding comics, I said budding, don't underestimate your ability to be funny when you're high.
Okay.
The biggest problem you have is you forget your act. So there was a time back in the day when I was performing a lot where I pretty much knew the order of every joke and everything, and I kind of knew the words, but the jokes were so much funnier. I mean, they were so much more fun to tell, and you were not quite as inhibited. Whereas when
that's why I have a couple of brains.
Well, yeah, I have, and I like to put back a couple of beers also, but the problem that I have. Not really a problem, but with doing a comedy act is you have one half a beer too much, and all of a sudden you start to slur a little bit, and there's nothing.
And I slur really easily.
And there's nothing, and I don't know, people, Dave Wilson, when I worked for him down at One Liners in Greenwood, he used to say that comedy is part of show business.
Mm-hmm.
There's no business without the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then he used to talk about all the components of a show, and that for you might get a fairly liberal church crowd that might come in one night, and there's 5 or 6 or 10 of them, and they might be sitting in the crowd and everything. And if they think you're a little bit popped, then it's going to ruin it for the, as the MC. If you're drunk as the MC and everything, then all you're doing is making the feature act and the headliner work harder. If you happen to have a group of people in there that said, how was the show last night? Oh, the first guy was drunk. I mean,
Mm-hmm. See, now I'm less worried about somebody saying that. Well, no, I'm worried about them saying that, but not because I've had a couple of things to drink, but because I trip over the stupid mic cord. Again, people, for you people who didn't know, I'm partially blind. That's why I run into things. I really am, actually. And I do run into shit all the time. You'd think I was dense, but I'm not drunk.
But yeah, kind of getting back to it, there'll be a time 30 years from now where people are going to say, really, you couldn't go to the dispensary and buy pot? Really? Back then? What was that like?
Well, I mean, come on, it's hard for me to believe that prohibition was ever a thing. It seems like that was something that was so stupid.
Well, it was the history of prohibition, and I get into a little bit of this in the book, and I'll talk about it a little bit. The one thing that really I find humorous is now when people look at the Democratic field for president, and there's so many women that are running for president.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what you don't realize is that after the Civil War, there were a lot of really influential women nationwide in politics, and there was you had the Republican Democrat Party, and then you had like the Whigs, and then they turned into something called the Progressive Movement, and there were 3 really prominent women in the Progressive movement. One of them was Mother Jones. If you've ever listened to the Mother Jones comedy show on cable radio, she was the head of the coal miners union.
Okay.
So you think about maybe the 1880s and everything, and rough guys. Coal miners were probably pretty rough physical guys, but they couldn't organize shit. They couldn't organize anything. So to have a successful political party back then, and if there was any kind of progression part of it, like now progressive is like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, you had to have a woman on board. because nobody was going to buy that it was going to work.
Mhm.
Because lo and behold, the men were always out working the fields and doing what they had to do to bring everything in. But you needed somebody back home that was going to, you know, tally up all your ducats and everything for your corn and make everything work and have food on the table and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And it was the females.
See,
so
that's the thing that I think that society, I think, forgets as a whole is that even though we were the last ones allowed to even vote, we have been running the country since the dawn of time. I mean, women have been, yeah, even if it wasn't recognized and it was behind the scenes, I think that men don't want to, some men out there don't want to give women the power or the acknowledgement of how much power we have, because we're so used to just always juggling everything. I mean, everything. It's always just been expected, and you know, we're just a product of evolution.
Well, when it changed, it changed because the guys are out working the coal mines, farming, whatever, and they'd come home drunk, and it was so much more socially acceptable to drink back then. And plus, you could make your own, and you know, you didn't have and it was straight alcohol. I mean, it wasn't watered down, or it wasn't like 5%. I mean, it was straight. And so the women just got tired of their guys coming home drunk. So in the progressive movement, at least in the 1880s, that's when prohibition started.
Yes, us women, come on.
That's when prohibition started, because
you ought to cut your nose off to spite your face is what you did.
And that's why women had such a hard time getting the vote, women's suffrage, and it didn't happen until like 1915, because you had a group of guys back there saying, well, yeah, it gave old girls some power here, and she took away my Jack Daniels. I ain't putting up with that.
That is a good point.
And so that is exactly when there was this exclusion. But every political party had a woman at the head. There was one gal named Frances Willard, who
I'm familiar with the name.
Yeah, she was the one that organized the farmers, like beforehand and everything. If you were a farmer and you showed up, you know, at the barge to send your crop down the Mississippi River, sometimes you would get your crop in, sometimes you wouldn't. Well, you didn't get your crop in, you were sunk for the rest of the year. So there was a female that started these co-ops. So every time you go in a rural area and you see a sign that says co-op,
right,
it was started by some gal. So you know, and people might think, you know, number one, you can't change history.
No,
you can kind of alter it,
but you can learn
to your own ends. But you know, if it says that a woman started this particular movement, here's another thing about history that was very, very tough for people in this state to come to grips with. Where do you think the word Hoosier comes from?
I have no idea. Please don't tell me a woman came up with that.
There was a common theory that Hoosier came from somebody saying, when somebody would knock on your door, you'd say, "Who's there?" And then that's what Hoosier. No, it wasn't at all. Back after the Revolutionary War, there was a slave in North Carolina whose name was Harry Hoosier.
Okay. Well,
and he was the carriage driver for a guy named Dr. Benjamin Rush, who was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. So they moved from North Carolina up to Maryland, and then Harry supposedly, and when you Google his name, he was the greatest orator of his time. Now we're talking Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, all these other guys, but Harry Hoosier supposedly was the greatest orator of his time, first Afro-American to ever give a sermon in the country. It was a sermon called "The Barren Fig Tree," and I think it was up in Boston at that time. But he led a group of people, not just blacks, but white. Everybody was moving westward at that time when they realized that after the Revolutionary War that there was all this land that was west of Virginia and Maryland and all that.
Right.
So he led an expedition that basically went across the Ohio Valley, and when they got to where present-day Louisville is, some people wanted to keep on going west, some people wanted to go south, and some people wanted to go north. And the people that wanted to go north were led by Harry Hoosier, and that's why we got the name Hoosiers, because we were named after a black minister after
Well,
the
there you
Revolutionary
go.
War.
That is
That's
kind
in
of
the
cool.
book. That's in the book also.
That is kind of cool.
So, there's a lot of things that people, I mean, and the reason that, and now you look at it, like maybe 15, 20 years ago, racially and everything, we ain't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But back then and everything, there was definitely a group of people that said, well, we're not named after some black dude. Our nickname's not some black dude.
Yeah, it is, apparently.
But it is.
Deal with it. You'll be all right.
Yeah, so that's one. Like I said, one of the things that's in the book, but that's one of the things that over time people come to grips with. So I hate to burst your bubble out there and everything that that women ran everything and that were named after some black minister, but hey.
We are getting down to.
We're getting down to the
We are. Well, no, we're getting down to the end. So I'm going to do a real quick shout out to our sponsor, which is Chaos Designs out of Seattle, Washington. If you hit up their website, there are links at various places on my personal page, the comedy page. Like us, like the show. But if you put in the code Rumble Fan, you get 25% off the entire site. So, and they got really cool designs. Do you have anything up and coming you want to plug in? What's the name of your book? We know it's coming out next year on the 29th.
Coming out on the 29th. The name of the book is Tinker Park. And that's pretty much where I'm focusing all my energy to. But to still go out and support live comedy won't necessarily, sometimes I'll get up sometimes. I kind of enjoy being part of the audience as well, mostly because I can drink more.
Well,
with no
we know where the priorities are.
And the bar owners, they love me.
Well, yeah, they love it when you're spending money. But we have to say goodbye because we're actually a little bit over today, but we ran into some issues. It happens. It's a Monday and it's raining. It feels like fall today, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Fall is here.
Well,
leaves are turning.
Thank you for coming all the way out in the middle of nowhere. I learned a lot today. Thank you for that.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And we are going to say peace out, hit your open mics, support live comedy, and we will see you guys next week.